Everybody's here. I'd like to go ahead and call the meeting to order for our meeting tonight, March the 9th. Ada, would you take roll call, please?
Sure, Mr. President. Mr. Nielsen,
Here.
Mrs. Contreras,
Here.
Mrs. Reyes,
Here.
Mr. Rader,
Here.
Mrs. Sashanek.
Here.
Thank you so very much. If we could take a minute and pledge allegiance. Those of you who have got flags there and would like to stand, please do so. We'll stand here. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much. I'd like to go ahead and take a moment of silence here. My thoughts tonight would just be again with those teachers, administrators throughout our district, as well as other places that are working so diligently to get things put together so that we might be able to have a safe place for our kids and our teachers to come and be. All right, next item, board member statements. Any of the members of the board have statements they'd like to share with us tonight?
I would. This is Amy.
Please go ahead.
I had the privilege of being able to tour the district science fair, because of course it was held virtually. And I just want to thank all of the teachers and especially the students who put in so much work into looking at all those science, into making all those science fair projects. As a middle school science teacher myself, I know all the hard work that goes into it. And then this year I had to do one as parents with my own kids. So I got to feel it from both sides. And I know that there's a lot of time and effort put into it. And I just want to applaud all of our students. They did such an amazing job, but also recognize Evelyn from Littleton Elementary, who got second place at the West Valley Impact Science Fair. And so that was all of the West Valley entering their best, and she got second for her grade level. So yay, Evelyn and Littleton L STEM. And then I also was able to do some Google Meets for the Littleton Elementary Cultural Fair on the 25th, and that was really great to get to hear all the students talking about their cultures and what's important to them and their families. That's all I have.
Thank you. The others, I guess one I'd like to just be appreciative to all of those who participated in the digital learning efforts a couple of weeks ago. I got to participate it, of course, by digital means. It was really good. I enjoyed that, and the reports that were there and presented. And then for Read Across America, reading, whatever it was, had an opportunity to read books on a video camera, and the city took those and put those all into pieces. So city council ended up reading a book, and it was in segments of who was able to read. So I thought that was really kind of fun. And all the other things, they put it up on YouTube, so you can go look at it now. So if there's no other things, Dr. Freeman, would you like to share your report with us?
You bet. Thank you, Mr. President. Make sure mic is on. Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. Buenas tardes a todos. It was 1 year ago. I was here sharing with you the news about the impact of the pandemic on our school district. And it was then that the governor first conceded the need to suspend coming into schools. I shared with everybody that we were working around the clock to address logistical challenges and to continue instruction, nutritional programs, and daily operations of our district, including our efforts to protect the health and safety of our students and staff, and our commitment to expanding the use of technology for instructional and operational purposes. And 1 year later, programs and practices are in place so that remote and hybrid learning are no longer new to staff and students, and they are adapting to new routines And while we are admittedly far from perfect, I am very proud of how far we've come as a district. Today, I'm encouraged that now we're planning to re-invite the return of students to our campuses. And as you know, our plan for the return to in-person instruction after spring break gave us a good head start on the governor's surprise executive order to bring kids back into our schools. We'll be emerging on the other side of the pandemic stronger than before, with more resources in place for digital learning, with expanded knowledge of technology applications, with better preparation for a variety of operational scenarios. We are not out of the pandemic yet. New variants and people letting their guard down over spring breaks threaten increased illnesses, so we will continue to prioritize safety. This year, expanded emotional supports in our curriculum. We pivoted on sports to keep healthy competition. We held the first ever virtual spelling bees, and we just finished up our annual science and engineering fair, as Ms. Sausnick mentioned. We recently held reading celebrations across our schools, as Mr. Nielsen mentioned. All of our schools had guest readers join virtually for Read Across America. I had fun reading The Monster at the end of the book to Miss Ayer's first graders from Country Place. Other activities at that school included read aloud with scavenger hunt, drawing Dr. Seuss characters, and doing Dr. Seuss origami. At Estrella Vista STEM, there were reading bingo games for daily prize drawings and a daily Bitmoji library with over 30 guest readers. Over at the Littleton STEM Academy, the CASA Adaptive Cross-Cat and Preschool programs experienced an in-person VIP reader. Quentin STEM Literacy Committee ran a month-long reading contest. Students used a Flipgrid to provide a summary of a book they read, and those with the most books read won prizes donated by the PTA. Students at Littleton STEM Academy also had their first ever virtual student culture showcase. Students created projects that celebrated their diversity and cultures and presented them to the community. They had a really positive turnout from staff, students, and community members, and wanted to express their thanks to Ms. Sausnick for joining the event, as she mentioned in her comments. On February 25th, the Littleton District celebrated the 7th annual Digital Learning Day, and we received a lot of positive feedback, including from Mr. Nielsen just now, on the amazing work of our teachers and students. Special thanks to the IT department, Mr. Verrill and Ms. Vasquez, for all the digital learning leaders, Ms. Jimenez, Mr. Short, Ms. Gerbic, Ms. Krausen, Mr. McCormick, Ms. Hudson, and Ms. Pitcher. I'd also like to thank Mr. Nielsen for joining in the event. He's been pretty much, I think, a loyal Digital Learning Day supporter all 7 years. And for those of you who missed it, I invite you to visit the event's website and watch the videos. Those links can be found on the Littleton District Google site. The winners of this year's West Side Impact Science and Engineering Fair have been announced, and I'm excited that Littleton had 4 winners. The Rubber Band Car Project from Country Place Leadership Academy won first place in the K2 category. Healthy Choice Lifestyle website from Quentin STEM Academy also placed first in the 3rd through 4th grade category. The Hand Sanitizer Project, also from Quentin, placed second in the 7th and 8th grade category. And lastly, How Far Will a Balloon Car Travel from Collier Elementary, placed 3rd in the 5th through 6th grade category. So we're proud of all of them. Congratulations are also in order for Ms. Robinson, our instructional specialist for exceptional students in early learning, who was awarded the Outstanding Leadership Award at the Annual Council for Exceptional Children's Conference last month. This award is given to a person who's demonstrated outstanding leadership in supporting special education and/or inclusive practices. Ms. Robinson exemplifies those qualities, and we're really proud of her. In closing, I'd like to thank Ken Osborne with the Estrella Rotary Club for their donation of 12 Chromebooks to Littleton students, to Twyla Markrum with Stardust Building Supply for their donation of $1,800 in school supplies, and to Riney Cotter with Swarkett Youth Initiative for their donation of a fitness app valued at $57,000 to benefit students, staff, and families at Quinton STEM Life and Health Sciences Academy. And that's all I have this evening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Freeman. Appreciate that. Ms. Vanderwater, are you out there somewhere hiding them?
I am, President Nielsen. Members of the governing board, Dr. Freeman, I'm excited to present to you our program showcase for this evening. Tonight, Littleton STEM Academy will showcase the Verizon Innovative Learning Grant that they were awarded. Verizon has been working to help foster digital inclusion through a transformative education program called Verizon Innovative Learning. It's a key part of their goal to help move the world forward for all through their Citizen Verizon plan. Littleton students have access to technology and quality STEM education. Through Verizon Innovative Learning and in partnership with Littleton STEM, they are turning belief into action by helping students achieve, learn, and create more with internet access, technology devices, and innovative next generation technology infused lessons. Principal of Littleton STEM Academy, Mr. Eric Atuhani, sends his regards and his regrets that he could not be here with us this evening. He had the opportunity this evening to see his senior high school age daughter play in a basketball championship game. In Mr. Atuhani's absence, we welcome Assistant Principal, Ms. Samantha Armstrong, and STEM teacher, as well as a student who have created a video to share about the new technology their school has received, and also about the immersive media project the 7th grade students are creating. Throughout this project, students have been using the design thinking process to create a virtual reality awareness campaign about ocean plastic pollution. Ms. Armstrong, welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Vanderwater. Good evening. Mr. President, members of the board, Dr. Freeman, and executive team. We are pleased to be here to share with you our showcase for Littleton STEM Academy. I will go ahead and turn this over to Ms. Mullins, our computer science teacher. He will go ahead and present our showcase to give you insight as to what our students are doing with the Verizon grant. Thank you. Ms. Mullins?
Thank you, Ms. Armstrong. Thank you, President Nielsen, members of the board, Dr. Freeman, and the executive team. As Ms. Armstrong mentioned, my name is Ms. Mullins, and I'm the computer science teacher at Littleton STEM Academy. This year has brought many challenges with online learning, but it's also brought many opportunities for students to learn and create using digital tools. At Littleton STEM Academy, we strive to show our students that you can use computer science and creativity to solve issues in our world today. Please enjoy this video my 7th graders and I created. It showcases the work they've been doing with the Immersive Media Grant that we've received this year through Verizon and ASU.
My name is Abigail Martinez Rojas, and I am a 7th grader at Littleton STEM Academy of Computer Science. I will be sharing with you about a project we have been working on with our computer science teacher, Ms. Mullins. Our school has been awarded a grant from Verizon and ASU called the Verizon Innovative Learning Grant. There are 264 schools participating in this program nationwide. The program aims to empower us to change the world by using emerging technology, design thinking, and social innovation. This grant has provided our school with over $4,000 worth of new technology, such as Samsung smartphones, VR headsets, 360-degree cameras, SD cards, access to websites where we can create immersive media projects, and even an entire curriculum to follow. Here is some background information about how we created this project. We are using the design thinking process and started out by empathizing with our audience and defining a problem. The project in our curriculum that we chose is centered around the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal number 14, conserve and sustainably use the oceans, seas, and marine resources. We want to educate our schooling community about plastic in the ocean and why it is such a problem. The next step in the design thinking process is to ideate and create a prototype. We are using a website called ThingLink to create a virtual reality presentation using 360-degree photos and interactive information. We are not fully finished with the project, but I will share with you what I have so far. I chose this 360 image because it has lots of fish in the ocean, and plastic pollution harms many types of marine life. My information is organized using interactive tags. For example, any tag that is a green question mark has pictures and facts as well as things you can do to help prevent plastic from getting in the ocean. And any tag that is a red play button has videos with more information on the issue and what you can do to help. If you were to open this project on your phone, you could turn on VR mode and put on a VR headset to make you feel like you are right there swimming with the fish. That is everything I have so far for my prototype. The last step in the design thinking process is to test and share. We plan to create posters to tell students and the community how they can access our projects. We are going to make both digital and paper versions so we can hang them up if we return to campus. I'm so thankful to have this opportunity to learn about new technology and how to use it. Here are a few students who will talk about their experience with this project.
It was really exciting, and taking up on like this whole project with my peers, and since it brought like a whole bunch of people together just to collab on one thing that can change the way people think about the ocean, and on how the perspective, like on how there's so much trash, and how we can all just clean it up, clean up the ocean, and it'll like grasp the attention of the little kids once they're learning about like the ocean, and like how like the ocean affect their lives every day, and they'll like end up growing up and being like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do this, so it will affect the younger generation.
Excited to do it because I started watching this guy edit VR and his friends. I got into it and I thought maybe I should trying something new, since I haven't been trying much new stuff, so I decided to try it. It was really fun, and I thought it was really good that this brought a lot of students together and they were all collaborating, talking and all that, and I'm really happy about doing this VR and can't wait to see how it's like when we're officially done with it, so that way maybe I could try it out, and I'm hoping that in the future I could just do VR as a career.
Thank you for watching and learning about this cool project we are creating at Littleton STEM Academy.
President Nielsen, members of the board, Dr. Freeman, and the executive team. As you saw in the video, my students are using the design thinking process, which is something computer scientists use daily to understand the user's wants and needs. Even though this specific set of students are not currently writing code, as this project is evolving, students have practiced skills like perseverance and problem solving to make their virtual reality presentation work exactly as intended. These skills are essential for students when seeking out careers in computer science. Just like Daniel in the video, many of my students have expressed interest in careers that use software engineering to create video games and other immersive online content. Other grade levels in our school have been writing code using block coding and JavaScript to create graphics and animations that tell a story. My 7th graders are really looking forward to 4th quarter, when we will get to test out the cameras, phones, and the VR headsets to understand how they communicate with each other to create this immersive experience for the user. I appreciate this opportunity to showcase the exciting things happening at Littleton STEM Academy. Do you have any questions?
Any of the members of the board have any questions? I'd like to direct Ms. Mullins.
No, but thank you.
I don't know a question. I just have a comment. When I first started to learn programming last century, we had all these cards that you had to put together, put them through a card reader and put them out, and hopefully the program came out well. And these kids have got things they can put together, and I mean, we didn't even dream of having visual effects or anything else like that. It's great. I'm very grateful for all the work that they're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Armstrong and Ms. Mullins. We appreciate it. Thanks especially to your students.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, tell the students thank you so much as well.
I will.
Thank you. All right, item number 8 is call to the public. Let me just remind you that according to the Arizona Open Meeting Law, any matter brought before the board by members of the audience may not be acted upon at this meeting. The governing board appreciates constituent participation and asks that attendees either email public participation comments to the board secretary at boardsecretary.littleton.az.org prior to the beginning of the meeting. Ada, do we have any that we'd like to review tonight?
Yes, Mr. President, board member, superintendent, we have a call to the public from Michaela Sirwins. She's a teacher at Collier Elementary. She's representing herself. Members of the board, while I understand that our returning is no longer a decision for you to make, I would like to provide the following statement for you and all district staff members to hear. With the availability of a vaccine and our returning to campus, I have the impression that many staff members think we are back to normalcy, that the pandemic is over and we can proceed business as usual. I would like to emphasize that this is not the case and that you still have a professional and ethical duty to act responsibly on campus. Our community still falls under the category of substantial spread, with over 200 cases per 100,000 people and 15% positivity. These numbers are higher than when we first shut down campuses 1 year ago. While we as staff members have been given the opportunity to be vaccinated, the CDC still recommends taking part in mitigation behaviors, such as properly wearing a mask, social distancing, and practicing hand hygiene. It is also important that we work diligently to enforce these behaviors with our students on campus, as they and their families may have not had the opportunity to be vaccinated like we have. Being a school district that serves students who are predominantly from low income and or minority backgrounds, these mitigation efforts are even more vital. Studies have shown that children from low income and minority backgrounds disproportionately experience hospitalization and chronic health effects from COVID-19. Source: I ask that staff members take this into consideration when they choose how to conduct themselves regarding mitigation behaviors on campus. Regardless of your beliefs about the virus, the choices you make will not only affect you, but will also affect others. I would hope that experiencing the moderate discomfort of wearing a mask over our noses is something that we all are willing to endure, if it means that we do not have students ending their school year on a ventilator. While we crave normalcy in our classrooms through hugs, group activities, and close social contact, I hope the sacrifice of short-term disappointment is one we are willing to make to avoid long-term grief when a student dies from COVID-19 due to the irresponsibility of an adult they trusted at school. Understand that if you are choosing to be negligent when we return, you are not only making the decision for yourself, but those who share campus with you.
Thank you, Ada. I appreciate that. And thank you for the information here provided. Next item, number 9, the consent agenda. Are there any members of the board that would like to pull any of the items in the consent agenda this evening? If not, may I have a motion to accept?
This is Amy, and I move that the governing board approve the items submitted for consent agenda.
This is Kathy. I'll second.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Mr. Nielsen,
Aye.
Mrs. Contreras,
Aye.
Mr. Rader,
Aye.
Mrs. Reyes,
Aye.
Mrs. Sashina.
Aye.
Thank you so much. Item number 10, Ms. Vanderwater, back to you. Student Agency Equity and Social Emotional Learning for discussion here tonight.
President Nielsen, members of the governing board, Dr. Freeman. In this evening's presentation, information will be shared with the governing board and the Littleton community about Littleton's intentional professional practices on key concepts, mindsets, and evidence-based processes to foster culturally responsive teaching and learning within our school and organizational environments, and the work we continue to collaboratively engage in to enhance our systems and practices. Additionally, information will be shared on the Student Agency Committee's yearly work to enhance our multi-tiered system of supports for social emotional learning and our continued approach to developing educators' cultural competence and efficacy in achieving equitable outcomes for all of our students. At the end of this presentation, we welcome the governing board's feedback and comments. Social and emotional learning, SEL, enhances students' capacity to integrate skills, attitudes, and behaviors to deal effectively and ethically with daily tasks and challenges. The Littleton Elementary School District recognizes the value and importance of supporting students' academic, social, and emotional learning, as well as the SEL of educators and our community. The Littleton School District believes that social and emotional learning will positively affect all students as empowered problem solvers equipped with the agency to be successful in the cognitive, social, and emotional aspects of their life. Next slide, please. In order to lead happy and productive lives, it's critical that people understand themselves and master a variety of other crucial skills, attitudes, and mindsets. These include forming healthy relationships, collaborating effectively, managing stress and conflict, pursuing ethical solutions to problems, addressing implicit bias, advocating for themselves and others, and empathizing with others. We know that from collaborating with leaders and educators around current research that these attitudes and skills can be explicitly taught, learned, and practiced. Research tells us that students are more successful in schools and daily life when they know and can manage themselves, understand the perspectives of others, and relate effectively with them and make sound choices about personal and social decisions. If we want students to cultivate these skills, attitudes, and mindsets in their lives, then SEL must be part of every child's educational experience. Next slide, please. The Littleton Student Agency Committee is made up this year of 34 staff members, including an executive director, district directors, site administrators, and educators representing all 7 of our schools. It is the goal of the Student Agency Committee that we identify ways in which equity and social, emotional, and academic development can be mutually reinforcing. To accomplish this required our committee to examine current practices, collaborate around adding additional practices, and engage in discussions around issues of equity directly. The committee has established, in alignment with the Arizona Department of Education, that the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, otherwise called CASEL, definition of transformative SEL should be a common definition in all of our 7, soon to become 8 schools. We believe that social and emotional learning is a process whereby students and teachers build strong, lasting, and respectful relationships, founded on the application of similarities and differences, the examination of the root causes of inequity, and the development of collaborative solutions to community and social problems. The academic, social, and emotional learning competencies with equity elaborations for adults and students in preschool through 8th grade focus on a set of social, emotional, behavioral, and character competencies that support success in school, relationships, and within the community. These competencies are interrelated and include self-awareness, social awareness, relationship skills, self-management, and responsible decision-making. The purpose of these competencies is to provide our school districts, schools, families, and communities who partner with us a set of desired knowledge, skills, and behaviors that are used to implement social emotional learning within our schools and classrooms and intentionally integrate within our preschool through 8th grade content areas. Littleton recognizes that these competencies benefit all students in an educational system, as well as all the students as part of the system. This year, we provided an overview training to school employees on the CASEL competencies and are collaborating around a plan to embed professional learning within our new teacher orientation and yearly staff plan for FY 21-22 and all future school years. Next slide, please. Systemic implementation of SEL both fosters and depends upon an equitable learning environment where all students and adults feel respected, valued, and affirmed in their individual interests, talents, social identities, cultural values, and backgrounds. While SEL alone will not solve long-standing and deep-seated inequities in an educational system, it can help schools promote understanding, examine biases, reflect on and address the impact of racism, build cross-cultural relationships, and cultivate adult and student practices that close opportunity gaps and create a more inclusive school community. In doing so, schools can promote high-quality educational opportunities and outcomes for all students, irrespective of race, socioeconomic status, gender, sexual orientation, and other differences. Equity in education requires a physically and emotionally safe and positive school climate for all students. Building strong social and emotional competencies for both teachers and students can play a key role in ensuring this educational equity. Littleton school district leaders and educators have been collaborating around our equitable practices. Next slide, please. Early in the school year, our Littleton Governing Board adopted a resolution for the district to commit to engage in activities to create greater awareness of bias and elimination of systemic racism and racist behaviors by supporting resources aligned to these practices, engaging in trainings, implementing SEL practices in our classrooms, collaborating around data, having open conversations, and enhancing our practices to have a greater awareness and elimination of bias and to maintain healthy school cultures and student-staff relationships. I would like to share a few ways that the Littleton School District has fulfilled and will continue to engage in this resolution in just a short amount of time. Next slide, please. One of the ways that our district has been engaging in these collaborative conversations and using data we have available is with our Arizona State University partnership with their Decision Theater. The Decision Theater has helped us to organize our Littleton leadership community and ASU researchers to better understand and explore solutions to complex issues facing equity in education. Using data analytics and high-performance computing models, the Decision Theater takes our Littleton data and transforms it into interactive data visualizations for our leaders to engage in collaborative conversations around these topics. Our leaders, in partnership with the ASU researchers, have and plan to continue to collaborate between different domains and indicators in the pursuit of comprehensive, useful, data-driven models that will help us build shared understanding and perspectives. As you can see on the slide, we have already collaborated around equity in school readiness, student achievement, self-regulation, attendance, attainment of grade level skills, and segregation based on SES and racial composition. These conversations allow for our leaders to examine practices and adjust implementation according to findings and decisions made. Next slide, please. Arizona Education Foundation's new Our World, Our Schools program is a groundbreaking initiative that provides training and workshops on anti-racism, equity, diversity, and inclusion for educators. The training is designed and facilitated by Arizona Teachers of the Year and higher education partners. Our world is a response to call for societal justice and reform around anti-racism. It was created to assist school districts with fulfilling commitments they made to adopt more equitable practices. In response to our governing board's resolution and our continued efforts to collaborate, engage, and improve practices around these topics, this spring, our school and district leadership, psychologists, and social workers will participate in this 3-hour introductory workshop, which will provide a foundational understanding of anti-racism and the historical constructs that sometimes lead to misunderstanding. We are committed to engaging professionals in equity, diversity, and inclusion training. Anti-racism goes beyond that to delve deeper into bias, the meaning of privilege, and common misconceptions people often knowingly exhibit. Our participants will learn ways to immediately begin incorporating classroom and school-wide practices that build connections with students. We are excited about this training this spring. Next slide, please. Our very own Katie Weisner, school psychologist at Littleton STEM Academy, recently presented to the staff at Littleton and again at the Innovations in Education Conference on how to recognize implicit bias in ourselves and the educational institutions we work. Her presentation was so powerful that we have asked her to present this spring to our all administrative group. And as we plan our PD schedule for next year, we plan to work in the training for additional stakeholder teams. The training focuses on implicit bias, how it is formed, how it impacts staff and students, and how we can address it. Data is used to illustrate the crucial conversations and professional organizations' call to actions, and explained in alignment with our governing board's resolution to continuously learn and examine our own biases, systematic inequities, and practices that develop a culture that honors equity, inclusion, and diversity. We are looking forward to this training this spring. Next slide, please. Some of the most common frameworks for organizing student supports are called a multi-tiered system of supports, otherwise known as MTSS. When school-wide SEL is implemented, the impact is felt on both sides of this multi-tiered system of support framework. This happens because social and emotional competence is essential for all kinds of learning. Whether a student is learning behavioral expectations, exploring how to partner with another student, how to solve a math problem, mastering how to join a game of kickball on the playground, or practicing taking the perspective of a character in a story. When all students have opportunities to develop and practice social and emotional skills, mindsets, and attitudes, students are empowered, and the demands of school and life become easier to navigate. School-wide SEL then is neither solely a behavior support nor solely an academic support, but positively influences both sides of the multi-tiered system of support framework. With the collaboration of the Student Agency Committee this year, teacher feedback, survey data, and our very own Superintendents Advisory Council feedback, we have developed a framework of tiered SEL support for both educators and students. Many of its components are in place already in Littleton and highly effective, such as our Make Your Day program, Kids at Hope philosophy, support of our 4 social workers, student agency goal setting in every classroom, and monitoring and social emotional learning time embedded in the school schedule. Next slide, please. We did learn that there was a need for a supplemental resource to support this SEL work. The Student Agency Committee, in alignment with the Educational Services process, engaged in reviewing a few supportive resources that our educators could use for this SEL time. In June, when we bring our district supplemental resource list to the governing board, you will see a resource called All Things EQ as an added support for our educators. All Things EQ collaborates with schools, forming a genuine partnership with teachers, students, parents, and staff. This model creates a sustainable social emotional learning program and engages students and families in a weekly theme with topics that range from mindset to grit. All Things EQ integrates effortlessly with what we are already doing and will enhance the systematic approach we take as a district to social emotional learning and the CASEL competencies. Next slide, please. Developing social and emotional skills in Littleton students is an important part of meeting the needs of the whole child. Another critical piece to meeting the needs of the whole child is creating trauma-informed social and emotional learning practices implemented within all of our classrooms and schools. Adults need social emotional competencies to be able to foster a safe environment so that children feel supported and can thrive, to be able to recognize when someone is experiencing an emotion or not feeling safe, to have and to use good listening skills, and to understand other people's perspectives, to see as best they can through the eyes of a child, to approach children with empathy and understanding, validating feelings and behavior, and building authentic relationships with the students we serve in our district. We are committed to providing professional development for our educators in the area of CASEL competencies, social emotional learning curriculum, equity practices, and supporting student SEL so that we can help ensure all children will cultivate healthy behaviors and have opportunities to thrive in the face of any difficulty or hardship they might face. Last slide, please. We are happy to hear any comments or feedback that the board might have in the direction we are heading with social emotional learning, student agency, and equity around the governing board's resolution that was provided to us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Vanderwater.
Absolutely.
Yeah, any other board members have any questions or comments they'd like to present at this time? If
Mr.
not,
Nielsen?
please, Don, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to note how supportive I am of this effort. It is so vitally important that our staff and administrators understand the role of implicit bias as we're thinking about things like disciplinary actions and the ability to incorporate that comprehensively with our students and engage them in conversations about equity and implicit bias. I think it is so important and so wonderful. And the trauma-informed component, I think, is also very important as we think about adverse childhood experiences and what some of our students have probably experienced with their home life, and making sure that our teachers understand that as they're connecting with our students, I think is vital. So couldn't be more supportive of this effort, and I really applaud the administration for moving the ball forward on this, and Ms. Vanderwater for all your efforts. And just a quick shout out to our social workers. I had some interactions with them recently, and I can tell you that we've got an amazing team that is just doing just awesome work for our students. So again, thank you.
President Nielsen, Member Rader, thank you so much for those comments of support. We appreciate it.
Any others of you have any comments or questions?
President Nielsen, this is Sarah. I just want to again echo what Mr. Rader stated. I just think this is such a crucial component for our students, especially right now when they're going to be, transitioning back into school. I mean, this past year has been such a traumatic year for some of our students, and so again, I just want to thank you and applaud you and the district's leadership for putting this into play.
President Nielsen, Member Contreras, thank you.
Thank you so much. I guess the only comment I can add is what's already been said there. I looked at your last second or third slide right there, Kristen, about learning is a social and emotional thing as well. I think too many times we go to school, and I'm probably guilty of it too, go to school, look at the book and try to learn something and get out and forget that there's other aspects and other part of that. And I'm grateful that you've addressed those things. I know from my background, I've always been taught if you teach correct principles, they'll learn how to govern themselves. So as we work and teach these young people that some of these things that we see, and Patty and I were talking about this morning, there's got to be somewhere in this circle or this chain or whatever it is goes round and round where somebody's got to break out of it. You just can't keep going round and round and round doing the same thing again and again. And I see that this is, really great, really good as to what you're planning on doing here, getting it up to the teachers to the students, and it will make a difference. We might not see it this year or next year, but we will see it and be able to reflect back upon the time when, the kids weren't able to come to school. I know I've got kids up in Reno, the 6th grader. He said, you know, Mom, I like the computer, but I want to go back and be with my friends. So this is great. Thank you so much for all you've done.
Thank you, President Nielsen. We believe we've designed a plan moving forward that's proactive, not necessarily reactive.
Great.
Thank you so much.
This is Kathy. I'm not going to dwell on everything that's great's been said. I just want to say thank you as well.
Thank you,
Thank
Kathy.
you, Member Reyes.
If there's no other comments on that one, again, thank you so much for your work. Mr. French, are you out there somewhere? You can review with us annual audit for some information.
I am here. And I do know that there are multiple items on this or multiple attachments to this item. So I'm just going to make sure that we get the right one pulled up. So Sue, yeah, March 21, there we go. Okay, fantastic. Well, President Nielsen, members of the governing board, Dr. Freeman and Littleton community, this evening, I'd like to highlight the annual financial audit that was recently completed for fiscal year 2019-2020. So we can go ahead and next slide. ARS 15914 requires that any governing board of a school district that has adopted an expenditure budget of $2 million or more for the maintenance and operations fund shall contract for an annual financial statements audit. In addition, any entity that expends $750,000 or more federal assistance must be reviewed by a single audit as directed by OMB Circular A133. Both the financial statement audit and the single audit are performed each year by an independent audit firm. We use the firm Heinfeld Meach & Company. The audits we are reviewing tonight are for fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2019 and ending June 30th, 2020. We have 3 parts to review of the audit, the comprehensive annual financial report, the single audit, and the USFR compliance review. I'd like to start with the comprehensive annual financial report. This is for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2020. The CAFR is a set of financial statements that comprises the financial report of the district that complies with the accounting requirements published by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. The electronic document attached to this item for your review is 159 pages. I would like to highlight the major points of this report this evening and then allow you to review the report in its entirety at your own pace. The most descriptive portion of the CAFR are from pages 17 through 26, and it's called the Management's Discussion and Analysis, or the MD&A. This is a narrative overview of the financial activities of the district for fiscal year 1920. This section reviews the financial highlights of the year. Following that, on pages 29 through 62 are the actual financial statements and the narrative notes to those financial statements. The final section I would like to highlight begins on page 121 and is the statistical section where financial trends, revenue, and debt capacity can be evaluated, as well as demographic and economic information that report on the environment of our district to help make comparisons with other school districts. The CAFR is also the document that the auditors submit on the district's behalf to be considered for financial reporting awards. Next page, Stu. For the past 13 consecutive years, Littleton Elementary School District has received both the Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting, as awarded by International ASBO Association, and the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting, as awarded by Government Finance Officers Association. As quoted by the letter of notice from GFOA, the Certificate of Achievement is the highest form of recognition in the area of governmental accounting and financial reporting, and its attainment represents a significant accomplishment by a government and its management. Next slide, please. Turning to the single audit reporting package, I recommend reviewing page 8. This is where you would find a summary of the type of report issued, any non-compliance or weaknesses revealed, as well as specific federal funds reviewed. For both financial statements and federal awards, the district was found to have no significant deficiencies identified and no material weaknesses in regards to compliance. In addition, there were no instances of material incompliance identified. The type of auditor's report is listed as unmodified. An auditor issues an unmodified audit opinion when the financial statements give a true and fair view and the organization has operated in accordance with all applicable financial reporting requirements. You will also see on this page where Littleton Elementary School District is identified as a low-risk auditee. The specific federal funds that were reviewed for this fiscal year was a child nutrition cluster. Next page. The last report that we have to review is the USFR Compliance Questionnaire. To assist the Office of the Auditor General in determining whether a district has attained an acceptable degree of compliance with the requirements of the USFR, the audit firm must complete a USFR Compliance Questionnaire. Once the USFR questionnaire is completed, it reveals any areas of deficiency. The USFR Compliance Questionnaire is 31 pages comprising of 18 sections with a number of questions per section ranging from 2 to 45, with a total of 176 questions that are written so that a positive response is desired, which means if they're all yes/no questions, any no's need explanations and are considered a deficiency. Through the completion of the USFR questionnaire, the audit firm identified 4 sections with an overall total of 6 notes for this fiscal year. These items are identified as a no answer on the questionnaire. No finding or deficiency is taken lightly, and we will continue to use them as a learning opportunity to work towards full compliance. Next slide, please. USFR deficiencies, as noted on the last slide, Littleton Elementary was given 6 notes or deficiencies of the 176 specific areas that were reviewed. The slide you're looking at now shows the average school district annual deficiencies as recorded for Heinfield Meach and Company clients. You can see in comparison to previous year, Littleton continues to be well below the average findings of districts statewide, whose past 2-year average was 19 per year. Next slide, please, Sue. Copies of each of the audit reports discussed tonight are available electronically in your packet, and hard copies are available upon request through the superintendent's office. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
This is Kathy. I just want to thank you. Coming out as clean as this is in an audit is not easy, so congratulations.
Member Reyes, I appreciate that.
Thank you, and I appreciate you speaking up there, Kathy. I can never find my mute button, so please just go ahead. Any others have any comments? I too appreciative. I mean, 13 years with both these awards is amazing, and then the number of the notes, if there are that many, just they're hardly even a percentage of it. So again, thank you, and all those others who have put so much effort in this over the years to make sure that we are above board with all the financials we have in the Littleton School District.
Thank you.
If there's no other questions on that, Mr. French, would you like to go ahead and take care of the next item, number 12, which is the request for proposal for auditing services?
Yes, thank you, President Nielsen. This item does not have a presentation attached to it. Back on December 8th of 2020, the governing board approved the release of an RFP for auditing services. Upon release, the notice of solicitation was sent to 31 vendors of record. Out of the 31 vendors, 4 responses were received. Once the responses were received, an evaluation committee reviewed the submissions and scored them based on a criteria set forth in the proposal. Of the 4 vendors that responded to the RFP, 2 were competitive. This the evaluation committee scored Heinfield Meach and Company the highest of the 4 with 898 points of a possible 1,000. This evening, we are recommending awarding RFP number 21-001-26 to Heinfield Meach and Company. This contract, when approved, will be for the current fiscal year with the option of 4 annual renewals through fiscal year 25. I would be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Any questions on the information Mr. French has presented to us tonight?
Yeah, Mr. President.
Please, John.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. French, how long have we been with Heinfield Meach as our auditor?
Member Rader, I don't have that information in front of me. I'd be happy to gather it for you. I do know that Heinfield and Meach works with many of the school districts here in the state. I can gather that information for you.
No, I was just, maybe this turns into more of just a general statement. Actually, following up on that, is there any value, I know that there's a limited number of these types of firms that do this work, and to your point, it sounds like Heinfield does a lot of the different districts, but do you think there's any value in occasionally switching up the auditing firm so you have, let's say, a fresh set of eyes taking a look at your books, if you will?
Yeah, Member Rader, I appreciate the question. We do look at that as in part of the criteria. Part of the criteria that we look at is familiarity with Arizona school districts. We look at reviews provided by Arizona school districts. We want to make sure that 2 of the auditing firms that responded were from out of state. And that brings up some concern that some of the rules and regulations that they may be used to in either California or New Mexico aren't the same as Arizona. We did have 2 audit firms that were local that, and those were the 2 that were competitive. But we looked at a number of different criteria to determine who we would award to in this situation.
Does that answer your question there, John? And he can look that up and we can get back, he can get back with us on how long.
Yeah, no, thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. French. Certainly I understand this went through an RFP process, so we have to honor that process, and they were received the highest bid. I'm just kind of curious. I think I asked this question actually 5 years ago as we were with them, just kind of with the general idea that maybe a fresh set of eyes is good. But I do understand the limitations of the number of firms and that they did score the highest. So certainly support the proposal, just more of a general comment than anything.
Member Rader, just to let you know, they do have different staff on our audit each fiscal year to avoid any perceptions of, to ensure that their independence.
No, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. French.
If there's no other questions, can we have a motion, the board, to approve this?
I'll move that.
I move that the governing board approve the award of RFP contract for auditing services to Heinfield Meach and Company.
This is Mr. Rader. I'll second.
Thank you all.
Mr. Nielsen?
Aye.
Mrs. Contreras?
Aye.
Mr. Rader?
Aye.
Mrs. Reyes?
Aye.
Mrs. Sashanek?
Aye.
Thank you so much. Next item, Dr. Freeman, results of the bond survey that went out. We'd like to review that with us.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. So what you see on the screen scrolling, maybe I'll get your mic. What you see on the screen scrolling is a text that went out on the survey. We had good participation from staff and from parents, very limited responses from the community. That was solicited just through the website, and so people were looking for that. What we did is give you a rating of actually the software, the SurveyMonkey software did a rating where they took people's first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth ratings and assigned a numerical value to that. That's a ranking of 1 through 12 on their scoring. And then we've given you the percent of respondents that chose either extremely important or very important. So they picked the top two categories versus the lower two categories. And for the presentation tonight, we've ranked them from the highest rating to the lowest. So we'll just scroll through here slowly. Student technology, and then a little description of that at Mr. Rader's request from the last meeting to help people understand what they were responding to. Then school air, sterilization, and ventilation. Those were the two top rated options. You can see 90% or greater, and then a 9.3 or greater than 10 rating. The next four are grouped together a little bit lower. And so solar did pretty good at reduced energy costs, rating 5.8 and 68%. Renovating maintenance facilities was 68 and 5.8. So that's still 2/3. And maintaining modernizing school sites was pretty close to that as well at 65. Its rating is its percent in the first two categories is a little lower, and its rating is a little lower. The lowest rated response was completion of a new school at 54% and a rating of 5.3. And then we put the estimated range of cost for those on this chart just to inform the community and the board of what we were looking at. As we analyzed the results, the conclusion we drew was that when we asked teachers and parents about what was most important, they picked the things that were most important right now, immediately in front of them. And providing for new school space a couple of years from now isn't a high priority for the people who are in school and working with technology and concerned about circulation and air and those things right now. I think as the management team of the school district and the governance body here of members of the board need to look further out in the time horizon to plan in advance, but it certainly is informative. And we thought because we have more than 50% in all of those areas, and we're really not thinking it's in the district's interest to build only 3/4 of a school at Alomar, that all of those have some support from the community. What we've done is worked with the bond council and the bond bankers at Stifel to put together potential language that encapsulates these responses, and similar to the language that was used by Tolleson Union for the board's information. We think Tolleson Union and Pendergast will both have bond questions on the ballot in November. So if the board elects to do that in an upcoming meeting, we would be another district electing to be on the ballot in November. I think by the discussion we had at the last meeting, concerns about how things are going economically. I'm going to talk a little bit more in the legislative update about revenues in Arizona. And I think most people are aware that the pandemic has impacted people very differently, some very harshly and some not so much. But our legislature is contemplating $1 billion tax cut to Arizonans. And so I think if the trend continues with the pandemic, that we reopen our doors to the community fourth quarter and next year, businesses reopen, that there's a potential that things will be looking up in the fall. What we would suggest if we want to move forward with this, and that'll be based on some discussion and direction of members of the board tonight, if you want us to bring back the financial modeling at the next meeting, would be non-administrative purposes. That's basically schools and students. And administrative purposes is basically central office. We would have supplying and upgrading student technology, including furniture and equipment, which was survey option 1 at 1.4 million. That's over the whole life of the bond. That's not in the first year. And then improvements such as school ventilation, sterilization, renovation, expansion of facilities, building grounds, and my screen is blocked a little bit by the Zoom, but you can see that that's survey options 2, 3, 5, and 6 at a total of 8.55 million. And then improvements such as school ventilation, sterilization, renovation, basically it's the same language, but it's only 1.45 million for administrative purposes for our guys in maintenance to improve that facility, that historic maintenance facility that's over on the Littleton campus. And what we've done is we took the range and we took a pretty conservative middle of the road amount. I think that adds up to maybe about 11.75 million, if memory serves me right. What we were estimating from our work with Stifel and the Bond Council was that if we did 15 million, the tax rate would go from $1.07 to $1.15. So that would have been an 8-cent increase. At 12 million, $1.07 to $1.11. That would be 4 cents less than a nickel. At 9 million, would only be a penny. And so we were trying to get under 12 million with our projection to maybe get down to just 3 cents on the tax rate for adding another bond. And that's, I think, based on 2 sales, the way they're modeling it now. So the question for us tonight, and it is for just some direction for the administration, not for action. So there doesn't need to be a vote. But if the board feels like we should continue to pursue this and have the bond company come and do a presentation to the board in April about what the financial impact might be, or if the feeling of the board is, these aren't as important at this time, or they're important, but you'd like us to look for another way to handle it. So, Mr. President, if you could just kind of, aside from comments of members, whether we should move forward with inviting the Stifel finance people to the next meeting.
Thank you, Dr. Freeman. I appreciate that information. Any additional comments, thoughts you've got this evening on what Dr. Freeman's presented to us here?
This is Amy. I think that we do have to finish building the school, and I know that the cost has increased as time has passed. I think that eventually we are going to have to go for a bond, and I do agree that ventilation system, sterilization, and things are becoming more and more important, especially as it doesn't look like COVID's going away anytime soon. So I would be personally interested in learning more from the company, and their name just left my head. I'm looking into going out for a bond because I think eventually we're going to have that conversation.
This is Kathy. I'm not so sure. I'm not saying we should or we shouldn't. I think right now it's hard to yes, we're going to have to build a new school, and yes, ventilation. But if you set a bond, the goal is to have it pass, because people tend to remember more when it doesn't than when it does. I think timing is everything, no matter what you're presenting. And I'm not sure. I'm okay with learning more about it. I'm not going to say I'm comfortable with it. I think we have to get back in school and people have to see how that's going, how the COVID numbers are, because if something happens, the numbers go south, we get back out of school. I just don't see this having support. So I'm not for it or against it. I'm torn. And so I don't have a solid answer for you right now.
Ms. Reyes, members of the board, just for your information, we're we are working up to this. The calendar for the board actually calling for election would be May or June. So you still have time to assess some of those things you're talking about. We would not be voting in April.
That's good to know. Thank you.
Mr. President, this is Sarah.
Go ahead, please.
I'd like to hear more information about this. So I would be all for, having the company come out and do a presentation for us.
All right. John, any comment from you?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I think I echo sentiment of the other board members. Completing the school at Alomar, I don't think is an option at this point. So I do think it's something we've got to look very seriously at. And I do think as we're doing that, considering some other really necessary improvements that'll improve the quality of life for our students and our teachers is a valuable exercise. So certainly supportive of moving forward at this time.
Thank you so much. I guess just one of the questions I have there. So if we scroll up there to those first three items, which was more associated with the students, all of this would be in a bond election. All of these added up. We don't have funds available to do any of these at the present time. Is that correct? Or is that what they would come out and present to us and show us with the bonds next month?
Mr. President, members of the board, so by definition, anything we would purchase with a bond has to be financed and paid for in the lifetime of the loan. So that first category, student technology and classroom equipment, its expected life would be about 5 years. And so it's a relatively small amount of money, less than $1.5 million, but we would need to pay that principal in the first 5 years following the sale or issuance of those bonds. All of the other items in here would fall into the 20 years or more category, and so they can be spread out longer. The reason we put student technology and classroom equipment is to give us a little boost into the everybody's got a laptop era. So we really had to scrounge around the marketplace for enough computers for everybody to have digital learning during the pandemic. And what we anticipate is some of those items may be lost or may not have worn well, that there are some software issues. I'm aware of some kids having difficulty with headphones and other kinds of components. So while we have money in our capital budget to maintain some refreshing of the computers that was in our plan that we did 2 or 3 years before the pandemic, we did not plan for having a device for every child in all 9 grades that was capable of doing some of the things we're asking those devices to do today. So this is a one-time shot in the arm upgrade to get us up to speed. And then we would have to go through our regular capital plan to do ongoing refreshing of those items. And actually, I said one time, but I think actually what we plan to do was to, if we did approve $1 million or $1.4 million, is do half of that in one set of purchases early in the bond life, wait a year or 2, and then do the other half. So we're not once again 5 years from that purchase looking to replace thousands of computers all in the same fiscal year. We'd like to be able to spread that out so that we can maintain a certain investment in student technology each year that keeps them up and running and with enough software capacity to run all of the programs the kids are running today. So that is kind of a short-term boost to our long-term student technology capital plan.
Okay, thank you. And then along with the sterilization and ventilation, that would be over a 5-year project once it was approved.
There's going to be a lot of activity in this area, I think. And so we would be working with a HVAC mechanical contractor first to procure what we're calling piggyback systems that we can attach to the packages. Packages is a term that we use for air conditioners that are much like you have in your home, where it's in a box, versus a central chilling system where in a big campus like a high school campus, you're moving and cooling a lot of air at one time. So you would add those to the fan or ventilation system. Ours is in one component, and then you have to run that and power it up constantly. So we would have additional energy, and I don't know how many months it would take us to cover the whole district, but I would say we want to move expeditiously. The sooner those are attached, the sooner we start to benefit from them being there. But we might not be in complete control of the work schedule.
Very good. So what I think what I've heard the board say here tonight is let's do a little bit more research. Maybe we can get the people out here on the bonds and go into this, maybe look a little bit and see what the timing might be on some of it. If the bonds aren't approved until when's the election, November this year, if money's not available till mid-January, is that how that works? Or is that?
Well, President Nielsen, members of the board, that's a good question. Is actually, once we know it's approved, we can begin expending it because we currently have bond reserves set aside for the building at Alamo. So once we have the approval, even if we have not sold the bond yet, we can use existing bonds in reserve that we will be selling to move up to sterilization, because we don't need to pay for the school up front. We pay for it as it's completed. So we would have the ability, as soon as we knew that was authorized, to start taking care of it.
Okay, thank you. I think that was one of the questions I had. So if we can ask you to have whoever we need come in next month and give us a little bit more detail on it.
Yeah, we just wanted to make sure that's what the board wanted to do before we invited them to do more work and to present. We will actually have them here to present to you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions on the survey information here this evening? If not, let's move over to item number 14, organizational chart and staffing.
Mr. President, members of the board, this item is for action tonight. We discussed this at the last governing board meeting. If we can open up the org chart. What we've done is retasked a director's position from from educational services over to human resources. And so to help clarify the change, we've moved the HR department out of the center of the org chart over to the left. The two boxes that are even further left are the specialists and the director that are no longer being proposed to be staffed. So that box to the left is the director moving from yellow essentially to salmon. So there's no impact on the budget or the percent of administration. That's the first thing that we did. The second thing that we proposed under HR was to suspend the coordinator position and actually have in our supervisor's position some part-time staff to help the supervisor with contract tracing, FMLA, and those kind of things. So the director would be able to pick up some of the responsibilities from the department. Dr. Kelly would continue to assist the director as well as the other directors in educational resources, the executive director in leadership, and the principals. And we would have some administrative cost savings by doing this because our budget overall will be smaller next year. That will help with our percentage of administrative expenditures. Though it's a minor adjustment, we did look hard to see if there was anything else we could move off the board. And we're having to do pretty much the same amount of work or more and manage a lot of grant funds because of the pandemic. So I think as far as changes for the next fiscal year 22, it's a little bit of belt tightening, and unless there's some other specific change that people thought of between the last meeting and this meeting, we recommend approval.
Thank you, Dr. Freeman. Appreciate that. If there's no comments or questions on that, can I have a motion for that approval?
This is Amy, and I move that the governing board approve the organizational chart for fiscal year 2021-22.
I'll second. This is Kathy.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Mr. Nielsen,
Aye.
Mrs. Contreras,
Aye.
Mr. Rader,
Aye.
Mrs. Reyes,
Aye.
Mrs. Sashanek.
Aye.
Thank you so very much. Appreciate that. Dr. Freeman, do you want to try to talk about the legislature and what they're doing down there?
Actually, Mr. President, I really don't. But I think, it probably is incumbent on us to do the best we can to follow things that are happening down there. And it's probably going to be a pretty impactful year. So in the text for the item, that's pretty much the same report I had in Friday's board update, from a week ago. What I would like to share with the board and the community is a little bit of an overview and some things that are happening right now. First of all, there's been a record-setting number of bills introduced this session. Not that many made it across them all, probably about half. In K-12, we're tracking over 90 bills related to education, and so far only 9 have been held or failed. There's so many things happening out there. Some of them are good, like suspending letter grades, some help for CTEDs, flexibility in the classroom site fund, things like that. But some of them are bad. The proposal to pay parents to leave school districts, some pretty heavy-handed conservative control over governing boards, and the options for choices that you've traditionally made, local control, even one to limit your actions and terms, which failed. Expansion of vouchers, which is huge, and then tax cuts instead of education investment. The House and the Senate right now are in the midst of budget negotiations that could result in more than $1 billion of tax cuts in Arizona. And that would include phasing in a flat income tax over 3 to 4 years at a rate of around 2.5%. According to that majority leader, Ben Toma of Peoria, the idea, this is a quote, their idea is to kind of do a massive economic development bill, and part of that is a sizable tax cut. That was quoted in the Capital Times. So their idea is to include cuts to property taxes, but then increases to sales taxes, which have been more popular in our state, a fraction of a penny. And then their pitch is that moves the needle on economic growth. And we've heard that for years. We're going to grow our way into prosperity, but it hasn't really been shared with the education community. Now, the minority leader, Reg Bolding from Levine, said it's not time to propose a big tax cut over the next 3 years when Arizonans are still hurting. The governor, as you may remember, proposed a $600 million tax cut over 3 years. Senate Republicans upped the ante by proposing $250 million in one-time tax law changes. House Appropriations Chair Regina Cobb said, that really is a linchpin on the budget. If you're going to do a $1 billion tax package, it takes a big chunk off the table for other programs, which, getting back to Minority Leader Bolden's point, the pandemic's not under control. The vaccine rollout's been slower than expected. And leaders argue that cutting taxes this year, saying any extra revenue should be used, would be better used to support state needs such as schools, bolstering the safety net, social safety net, and helping people who've been hurt economically by COVID. So that's all happening kind of in a behind the scenes debate down there. It's hard to imagine that we work in one of the poorest funded K-12 systems in the nation and they're considering cutting revenue. But evidently the sentiment against voters passing Prop 208 is running pretty hot. And so continuing to starve the education system that's already suffering from a teacher shortage, I think maybe as much of an emotional response as a practical economic development response. Unless, of course, the intent really is to get rid of public schools. This morning, Capital Times hosted a morning scoop session on the new normal in education, and it didn't include any educators, only lobbyists for school choice and privatization, with one mom representing minority parents who'd been convinced that those people would benefit from more school choice. Stand for Children, who I'm sure a lot of you have heard about before, is inviting everybody to an event tomorrow, Wednesday, at 3:45. So for most teachers, it would be after school. They believe that these big companies and politicians are trying to undermine the voters on Prop 208. And they are asking people to gather friends, neighbors, families, members, and children and join them for a drive-through protest at the Capitol. So that's not going to be a sea of red, teachers wearing red, but they're meeting at the corner of 19th Avenue and Jefferson tomorrow. And I don't know how long that parade will be. We won't see a lot of teachers in red shirts, but it should be interesting to see what the turnout is. You know, they want to make a statement to the legislature about supporting public schools. So things are lively and I think getting heated. Probably will get more heated. I think the legislature still wants to try to finish the session in 100 days, which is, you know, around the middle of the month, next month sometime. So we'll keep this on the agenda for future meetings because I think, you know, there's going to be a lot of things happening and changing as the session progresses.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Have any of you got any questions on any of the legislation or bills that you've heard of?
Not at this time.
Oh, Mr. Rader did ask about the limit, right now the budget proposed is under that, so they don't have a need actually to set it aside.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Dr. Freeman, item number 16, instructional models.
Okay, Mr. President, members of the board. So tonight what we've done is put together, I think, several resources for people to review, but one of the things I want to do early is make people aware of the new scale. And so you can see that's come up with the blue, yellow, orange, and red. And really what they've done is they've changed green to blue, and then they took yellow and divided it into two categories. Part of one of the challenges we were going to have is getting illnesses under 10 per 100,000. So they've divided that into 10 to 50, and then basically 50 to 100 and 100 and over. the numbers that were quoted in the call to the public tonight, with 15 and over 200, were from February 7th. So those are already over a month old, and the statistics for the state and for the county have been, those metrics are dropping. Now the challenge we have is both the state and the county websites have taken the 3 metrics that were reported before and taken those down. So we no longer have those to report. And obviously this is timed along with the governor's order for people to return to school. So if we scroll down a little further, you'll see now what's on the state's website, and that is a county by county report. And the thing that's important here for people to see is Maricopa is about in the middle. And if you look across Maricopa for case rate, positivity, and transmission, what you see is orange and then yellow and then orange. The thing that we're most interested in the school setting is the percent positivity, because that seems to be what impacts spreading the virus amongst young children. So if that was substantial or high, we would be feeling more cautious about opening school. Because the transmission level and case rate are so substantial, probably the main mitigation strategy on that is vaccinating your staff, and then having staff that aren't vaccinated work in a setting like continuing to do remote teaching, where they're not going to have the same exposure to the kids and to colleagues. Concern for us is that our region of the county has run a little higher in 2 of those metrics than the county average. And now we're being rolled in with the whole county, even though Maricopa is a huge county, both in land mass and in population. So that is a little bit of a concern, but what we imagine is the politics are driving this a little, as they have from the beginning a year ago. The county said they may have some new data for us. This is the state data by county. The county said they may have some data for us, broken down by regions, that they were working on that, but they weren't sure when they would be able to have that. So I don't have that for board members tonight. But you can see that essentially in those 3 metrics for Maricopa, we are orange, yellow, orange. So what we've done is put together our own matrix for mitigation. And that is going to be, let's see, I think is that expectations for return to in-person. And so what we have here is we've kept the green, and the idea is green is what you would say schools would have looked like before the pandemic. So for instance, if there was influenza outbreak and people wanted to wear masks would be optional. With pandemic spread still happening, the blue model, we would want to continue to require masks. We think having masks on in settings where you have a lot of people together is probably one of the most important things you can do to minimize spread. In the yellow model, masks are required, and staff and community are still following directions of public health. We would have additional PPE as needed, sanitization stations around the school. Then what you see is if you go to orange, things get more restrictive. Masks are required, and there's additional PPE. Employers aren't eligible for telecommuting, would have to have underlying medical conditions. So what we've done is a whole spectrum of Model C, which is red, is everybody is online and everybody that can be remote is remote. And green to the left is everybody is able to come into school that wants to come into school. And yellow is the middle. So if we scroll down a little bit, so we have mitigation and staff safety, that applies to all categories. what we would expect to see different in the nurse's office on the playground. So let's stop right there. You can see since the kids are all virtual, there's no playground equipment being used, it's all virtual activity. That would also be true in the orange. In the yellow, we would open up the playground and we would sanitize that a couple times a day. In the blue, sanitize it once a day. So sanitizing playground equipment isn't highly efficacious, but it does create an additional level of prevention and confidence for people. When you get to green, we're back to having playground equipment out there accessible. We would still like kids to wash their hands before and after lunch and playing and those kind of things, but wouldn't necessarily have to have everybody with a squirt of sanitizer in their hands on their way back to the room. So we've gone through each one of these. I'm not going to belabor every one of them, but just to make sure people know what's been considered. If we scroll down, special program services for our resource and interventionists, IEP meetings, how special areas would be handled. Let's stop on special areas. You can see that if it's red, everything's virtual. If it's orange, we would have modified schedule on Wednesday. Library services would be limited to online, but in yellow, teachers are going to conduct instruction in homeroom classes where it's possible. We think that if the homeroom stays together, PE may be able to take students outside in a designated area. We think fresh air is probably going to be good for them, but library services would be limited to small groups because it's inside. Then you can see when we get to the blue level, which is below 10 illnesses, below 5% positivity, kids are actually going to be able to go back to designated classes into the library. Remember that if we go up above to the very first row, everybody's still wearing masks. The only time you wouldn't wear masks is if you're immunized and everybody in the room is immunized. So if 4 teachers are meeting and they've all been immunized, they don't have to wear masks. But if one of them isn't, they have to keep their masks on. So that was new from the CDC this week. We have, go ahead.
I'm sorry, can I just ask a quick question?
Sure.
How will you know? I mean, are you asking teachers if they're immunized? How are you going to know that? Are you?
Yes, we are. We are doing an inventory of who's immunized and who's not. And part of the reason for that, Ms. Reyes, is that if there is a case in a school and we're doing contact tracing, we know who may be impacted by contact and who may not be impacted by contact, and who may need to be sent home and who may not need to be sent home. So that will be important in our response to if any infection appears on the school campus. And if there are people who specifically need to be excluded for health reasons, HR will have that on file as well. That's your question.
Yes, thanks.
You're welcome. So internal meetings, before and after care, on-site support, which was open when we weren't open to students. And so we won't be providing on-site support once we bring students back. The public offices, which would be our front office, welcome centers, and school offices, we intend when we come back to keep those open to the public, but virtual appointments are preferred, and in-person services have to follow all mitigation protocols. Our preference would be if people show up without an appointment would be to make an appointment for them. When we get to a blue model, we might be able to handle a little more of that ad hoc. Substitutes, as you can imagine, are a challenge during the pandemic, but we have a plan for how to handle those. We have some teachers on assignment, and one of the unique things about them is they're out working with a whole range of people. So there's not a cluster in which they participate. They float from room to room to room, grade to grade to grade. So we are restricting that a little bit when metrics are high and loosening that up as they get lower. Shared materials is a concern of parents and teachers as well. And so when the metrics are high, we don't want materials shared, reproducible, tangible, but not shared in a group environment. We can have them out if we have cleaning protocols in place. But you would see them back on green. We're used to having kids share all kinds of things at a table, and we would be able to get back to that. And the blue is kind of a halfway in between. We spent quite a bit of time on food services. If we came back on yellow, which is where our metrics indicate we would be, students would go, they still have breakfast in the classroom, but they would go to the cafeteria for lunch. Their seating would be all facing one direction, so nobody's breathing on the person across from them. Spacing would be as much as tables will allow. There's no salad bar, and actually food service is looking at a meal plan where they may be able to deliver I don't want to say prepackaged, but predetermined meals, so kids aren't hemming and hawing over choices, but that the meal is the meal. It's the happy meal, and they'll be happy we're serving it. But of course, as we get less and less restrictions, we can provide choices again and salad bar and open things up. The governing board is the top of the next page. And what we imagine is today we are in like the model, we're in model C or model B, is that the board is virtual and the audience is remote. And so when we go to yellow, what we envision is the next level is the board would be in person with cabinet on site, not necessarily in the room. The audience would continue to be remote, and just like they are now, can listen in live on the meeting and view what's on the screen. And that would also be recorded and on the YouTube channel. But because we don't know who's vaccinated or who may have other illnesses, we're not going to invite everybody into the boardroom where people would be, convening in a large group. When we go to blue, the board would continue to be, and the cabinet would be at the dais. We could have limited capacity in the boardroom, which hasn't really been a problem except when we had events for parents participated. And then when you get to green, we're back to what people would remember as a traditional board meeting. The board and the cabinet are at the dais. We're inviting people to come into the meeting to give awards to students and those kind of things. So what we try to do in each of these is gradually go from most restrictive to least restrictive. Assessment, make your day, volunteers, field trips, and staff travel. You can see all of those have been laid out along a spectrum of 5 levels of mitigation. So what we think the course of action we need to take based on the governing board and the order from the governor is to start school in the yellow column because that is the percent positivity that's in Maricopa. So it would be a hybrid model. And what we plan to do is have the hybrid actually is Wednesday. So right now we've been testing the Azella test with English language learners and bringing them in. We won't be able to bring them in on the same schedule after break as we were before, because now we're going to have kids at school. So we have a few kids we need to finish up with Azella testing. If we can get those parents to cooperate with us, that would be the first Wednesday. The second Wednesday, we need to do some science testing, and April is pretty much AZ merit testing. Now, the kids who are in school are going to take those tests in school Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. But the kids who are still remote, those Model C kids who are staying home, we are being required to bring them into school to test them. They want to have a controlled environment. I don't know that that necessarily makes sense to everybody, but that's what the state's asked us to do. So through April, we want to use Wednesday to bring in small groups of kids who otherwise would not be in school. So they're not going to be exposed to the rest of the kids. It's only going to be the remote at-home kids in small groups completing their state required testing. Now we should be able to finish that up by the end of April. And then if the metrics are good, we could move to the blue model and have everybody 5 days that wants to come in once we've completed all that. So, so part of what we're doing is saying if we start yellow, we can go from 4 to 5 days. If there's a spike in metrics and the community is really concerned because of variance or spring break behavior, we could go back to the orange, which is 2 days on, 2 days off, what we were doing in October, with the idea of trying to keep school open to some degree as much as possible to finish out the rest of the year. And so that's our recommendation to the board, is to adopt the middle column, the yellow column of mitigation, considering where the metrics for Maricopa County are for the start of school on Monday. Now, people are ramping up. Dr. Kelly is putting out a school opening countdown daily newsletter to the staff, and transportation's been working on bus routes. I already told you that. Our food service people are working on a plan. So we're probably more concerned about communication than logistics at this point. And then it'll be like the first day of school, we think. I had a chance to talk to the Avondale police chief at the State of the City event and told them that we might need some cruisers rolling around because I imagine we'll have traffic issues and all kinds of things like that on the 22nd, much we would have, you know, on the first day of school in July. It'll be our third first day of school this year. And so I think I think we'll have some of the usual stressors when we go to do that. And you know, of course, now that you've seen the different levels, of course, the staff will do their best to respond to whatever requests or concerns the board has and be taking note of those in your discussion on this item.
Thank you, Dr. Freeman. Let me open it up. Any of you got any comments or thoughts you'd like to ask Dr. Freeman or review?
Mr. Nielsen, this is Mr. Rader.
Please go ahead, John.
Dr. Freeman, can you give us a general idea regarding how many students responded to the survey and are remaining virtual? Maybe just a general idea about how many are remaining virtual and how many teachers are remaining virtual to serve those students?
The students? Okay, so what? So we just closed that, Mr. Rader. Thanks for asking. We have about an 80% response rate, and it's looking like 60-40 right now. 60 returning to school, 40 staying home. We expected more kids to be returning to school, and we are after the parents that we haven't heard from. Our plan right now is to if we haven't heard from them, not change their placement unless we need to. Placement, by placement I mean at school or remote. And then we are probably going to have to reshuffle some school rosters a little bit to match remote teachers with remote families and in-person teachers with in-person families. That work is going on this week.
Just a follow-up to that. So if they don't respond, do they default to one modality or the other?
Right. I was trying to anticipate that question. So right now they're in the Synergy system either as a B or a C. And so what we would try to do is not change them, assuming we have staff to service them. So if they're a C and we have a C teacher with room in their roster, they may not have the same teacher, but they would keep the same service level, remote or in person. And then that is the fallback, is keep the service level but change the teacher. Now, if there's no spaces left, they might get their service level changed, but at 60-40, we don't anticipate that being a problem. That's more of a problem, is that percent of the group gets smaller and smaller. Like if you got down to a 90-10 and that 10% is getting pretty small, then then managing that is more challenging. But right now, we have just really kind of migrated in the spread really not that far over the course of the year from 50-50 to 60-40. I'd say maybe 1/3 staying home and 2/3 coming in. And I think there's some people who still want to watch the metrics. So, and then our region has had more concern than say the East Valley or other parts of the county. So I think it's still pretty dynamic, Mr. Rader. That is the business rule though. Keep them in the same model and change the teacher if you need to before you have to change both.
Thank you, Dr. Freeman. Mr. President, if I could just make a few additional follow-up comments as well. I just want to again thank the flexibility of our staff and our administrators through all of this. I think throughout this very difficult year, as we've continued to adapt and make changes to try to meet the numerous challenges posed by the pandemic, our teachers have really been outstanding in meeting that challenge. And I know our staff, even putting together all these mitigation measures is quite remarkable. To maybe some of the earlier comments that were made during the call to the public, I just do want to point out that the safety of our staff and students continues to be paramount in all of our decision making. And I'm happy to see all of the mitigation measures that will continue to be in place through Model A and B for those students that are choosing to return to the classroom. And I'm excited to support that model for those students that would like to rejoin the classroom. Just my final comment I would make is, as far as school board meetings, I actually believe that those should be open to the public as well. I think that staff might want to think strategically about different presentations, and inviting, let's say, groups of students to those meetings may not be appropriate. That drives larger crowds typically to our meetings. But if we do have parents or staff that would like to attend our school board meetings, I think that they should be afforded that option. I think if you were to look at other models, let's say for the city of Avondale, while there's certainly social distancing and mask requirements in place, it's the people's business, and I believe that they do have a right to attend that meeting with social distancing and mitigation measures in place.
Thank you, John. Any of the others have any of you got any thoughts or comments additional?
This is Kathy. I also want to thank everyone for putting this category together. It could not have been easy because there's so many variables in it. But I do want to mimic what Mr. Rader said. And of course, safety for our children and our teachers are always top priority. And so with that, I support opening with the yellow column, as we were calling it, giving that one day of virtual learning that gives everyone time to sanitize and maybe restock PPE or whatever it is that you may need to do while that virtual training is learning is going on. So I definitely support that. And I do agree also with Mr. Rader that, any position you hold, regardless of where it's at, it is the people's business. And I think that I support that as well. If people want to come, they certainly should be able to come, and I have no problem with that. So I would support the yellow column or the blue column, but I understand you may need a day to clean and sanitize and do all the stuff that one day of virtual learning could give you. So I'm fine with that.
Thank you, Kathy. Appreciate your comment. Dr. Freeman, please.
Mr. President, members, Mr. Rader, this is our best idea. It's not carved in stone, and so I think the adding staff to what we were really trying to do is to create a continuum of more restrictive to least restrictive, and where we would land in that. But I think especially adding staff to the yellow column is probably okay, because we have a pretty good idea who they are and if they've been vaccinated or not, versus opening it up to anybody who might walk in. I think that does add a nice layer of continuum to staff in the audience. I mean, people still have access to the meeting as they do now remotely. And I don't think anybody prefers that, but it's not no access, right? So, you know, unless there's an objection, I'm happy to modify that. And part of the reason to show, not read it to you, but show it to you is if you have other ideas about how we might improve it, you know, please share them with us, you know, email Curtis or myself, or, you know, and what we imagine is this is a theoretical document that gets us started on next Monday, the 22nd. But once we engage the community, we may need to adapt and revise. We're, you know, completely appreciative of that, and willing to work with the board and the community to make that make sense. So thank you for the comment.
Great, thank you. So if there's no other comments, I think we need to, there's an action for this one.
No, the motion that you made before was to open school 22nd consistent with metrics. And I think the proposal we have for the yellow column is, so unless you want to change that, if you wanted to change that, you would need action. But I think what we're doing fits with the board's prior motion.
Very good. If that being the case, then is any other comments or questions tonight? I think the only other thing on the agenda here is adjournment.
This is Amy, and I move that we adjourn the meeting at 7:56.
Thank you so much.
This is Kathy. I'll second that.
Thank you, Kathy.
Mr. Nielsen,
Aye.
Mrs. Contreras,
Aye.
Mr. Rader,
Aye.
Mrs. Reyes,
Aye.
Mrs. Sashanek.
I guess the only thing we need to remind you then is when we have our next meeting, which will be April 13th. You're invited to come and be part of us here in the district office.
All right.
All right.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you. Good night. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.